All right, so the format that I'm recording in is it gives me a capacity of maximum 20 minutes. Supposed to be, I'm not really sure because it's like ProRes or whatever. So I chose the video that has the most views and likes on it, which is the relationship one. And the whole point of, again, this series is kind of like looking back at what my mentality was when I was 19 in comparison to like where it is. So the animated videos are based off of the book, which is based off of 19-year-old me. And then we're going to just kind of follow up with it.
Relationships are mirrors. They show you who you are, not just who you pretend to be. You want to know someone's true character. Watch how they treat people when they're angry. Watch how they love you when they're tired. Watch how they listen when they disagree. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with how they make us feel about ourselves. But feelings change. So if the foundation isn't real, the whole thing collapses.
All right. I believe this is still true. I think at the time that I wrote it, I was much more focused on the positive aspects of a relationship and how they make you feel like happy and good about yourself. But as I've grown up, I and experienced different types of relationships, I realized that that involves toxic relationships as well. Because if you have past trauma, right, of neglect because of your parents or your childhood or whatever your situation is, well, then you end up finding somebody who treats you like that, most likely. And you subconsciously call that love, right? And that goes into the whole aspect of like, what is love? What is the definition of love? Well, you can't truly define it because it's such a broad term. It covers so many different things. One of the main things, obviously, is like that butterfly feeling, but technically, lust is a type of love, passion, chemistry, uh, genuinely just liking somebody to the next level type of thing. Feeling like you can't live without them, or breathless imagining their absence from your life. So, yeah, but no matter what type of love it is, there has to be a foundation. So I do believe this is still true.
Being a parent. Having a child doesn't make you a parent. Being there does. Teaching, supporting, apologizing, listening, staying. A parent is someone who shows up consistently, even when they're tired, even when they don't have all the answers, especially then. It doesn't have to be biological. If you show up and a kid counts on you, you're part of the story now, and here's the truth. Kids aren't clay for you to mold into a mini version of yourself. They're people become. You're just the guide who walks beside them, trying not to screw them up too badly. Single parents, it's not easy. So find people who add peace to your world, not drama. Your child becomes what they see. Love it.
So, yeah, I kind of agree with this. I think, like I mentioned before, because of my background, and that might be why I mentioned like the single parent um, thing in there. Um, yeah, I believe especially nowadays, from my experience as an educator, it's bad out there, especially out in the West. Um, People aren't parenting; they are just being the adult in the room, and that's not enough. That doesn't suffice. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we've lost our communities. We've lost, the closeness of, um, I forgot what it's called, but like when you have a giant family, aunts and uncles and cousins and all of that. And when I was younger, when my father used to send me to Syria, I have 32 cousins, like direct first cousins. Like it's a massive family. I have four uncles and three aunts. Um, so it's pretty serious. And not everybody got to experience that. Now, when I went back to the US, I didn't have that, right? So I lived most of my life in the US as like an only child. And even when I moved out when I was 18, it was same situation where it was like I was alone, I was the only child. But then I was like, okay, you know what? Actually, I need to get out of the country. I need to go visit family. And I went to Syria on my own. Like I saved up some money and I went. And we'll get into how I got the money another day. That's not the discussion for today. So I feel like, yeah, so many people are not actually parenting now. And it's getting worse. I believe that East Asia, for the most part, is still kind of holding on to that, but they're also losing their grip, especially with the addiction to social media um, and just having like everything in your pocket. It used to be like whatever was on TV was what you watched, and that was it. You want to watch this, you watch it. You don't, we'll go stare at the damn ceiling. And nowadays, it's like, well, everybody in the house is watching something different. Everybody's doing something different. Everybody's in their own bubble. So yeah, it's a bit of an issue.
Not drama. Your child becomes what they see. Love and happiness. The weirdest emotions. They don't live in your head. They live in your bones. They make you do things that don't make sense. Laugh when you're hurting. Cry when you're happy. Stay when you should run. Run when you should stay. Real love is messy. It's every emotion crammed into one person. And if you felt the full spectrum, anger, lust, joy, heartbreak, and you still stay, that's love. Happiness is temporary. It comes in waves. So does love. But if you know where to swim, you don't drown. Marriage.
All right. So, wow. Okay. I I guess maybe I should watch my videos before I even start giving commentary about it. Yeah, and just like I said, it love covers a lot of different things, and we because of Disney movies growing up and entertainment and social media, we always subconsciously have been connecting like love and happiness, and it's like yeah, but they're not mutually exclusive. Um, I was talking to somebody today, literally about this. I was like, the emotion of hate. Typically, the true hate can only come if it started from a place of love, because what happens is that expectation gets broken, right? And now you have that. Now, I'm not talking about spite or envy or any of that stuff. I mean, just like unadulterated, just kind of being a teenager and you're like, Mom, I hate you. Yeah. Where does that actually come from? Well, that comes from love. That comes from a place of like, I expected more out of you. Why did you do this to me? Why are we in this situation kind of thing? So, yeah.
Waves. So does love. Security, support, stability.
All right. So,
Comes in
here we go.
obligations. Marriage is work. Security, support, stability. All that stuff isn't free. Someone's paying for it. Men, you carry the weight. Financially, emotionally, spiritually. You don't bring that weight home and dump it on the floor. You find a way to handle it, or at least talk about it without turning your home into a war zone. Women, you're the anchor. Home, heart, healing. That doesn't mean housework. It means presence. A shoulder, a partner, a lighthouse in the fog. Marriage isn't 50-50. It's 100-100. On days when you barely have 30, that's why it works. Or why it doesn't. Dating.
So, yeah, I still agree with this. I know in this I'm mentioning genders, but even if you don't speak about genders, well, there are still roles, right? Especially if you have children or something like that. Somebody is the first person to call when your kid is, throwing up in the middle of the cafeteria. And then the other person is the second. And it's not to say that it's not interchangeable or, different dynamics. But the reality is, usually, if you have a healthy relationship, you have to discuss these things. Who's the one who's going to pick up the kid? Who's the one who has to make sure that, like if we have to make a choice between, okay, well, holding on to your current job and the other, your partner has a better offer, right? These types of dynamics are very important. So I believe that 19-year-old me had the best intentions, and I think that when I said it like that, that's what my intention was. But as I've grown up, I've realized that the generalization of using the term man, woman, male, female doesn't really have to be. It can even be in a homosexual relationship, because especially again, like the point to me, still now, is marriage is not just companionship and lifelong commitment, but it's with the intention of having children. be it adoption or natural or otherwise. So, yeah, you have to come in at 100%, even on days when you are barely at 30. What does that mean? Well, I am at 30%. So, 100% of 30% is 100% of 30%, right? It doesn't matter if you're exhausted. It doesn't matter if you're bored. It doesn't matter what your situation is. So, yeah, I still believe this. And, yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one.
On days when you barely have 30, that's why it works. Or why it doesn't. Dating to whatever. We've all
I want to stop this real quick. So I have two sections here. One is dating to whatever and dating to marriage. And um I'm very curious. Like I kind of do wish I added more notes or explained to myself or in a journal or something why I was so adamant on separating these two topics. And I guess it's because part of me even back then was much more flexible to the idea of like being in a long-term relationship that did not lead to marriage. And I think we're going to get into all of that.
done it. You date someone knowing it's not forever, but it's fun for now. Sometimes it's honesty. Sometimes it's denial. The problem is when one person is dreaming of forever and the other's just killing time. If you're dating without direction, at least be clear. Don't waste someone's time when they're looking for their person. Dating isn't just for sex or laughs. It's a test drive, not a demolition derby. Know what you're testing, know what you're ready for, and if you don't pretend you do.
Okay. So again, yeah, I 100% agree. Like honesty, being candid. This is one of those things like in all of my past relationships, I've never had this complaint. And that's because I was very upfront about it. Like if the person was I was just interested in having a physical type of relationship with them, well then that's what I told them. And if it was more of like, you know what, actually, I really see this going somewhere, I want to continue, then that's what I told them as well. Now, that doesn't always work out the way you would like it to, because the other person has a right to accept or not accept, right? They have a right to question, they have a right, so they are also in that. But in the end, they've always been like, well, at least you didn't play me, right? And I think that's very important. I've even had like exes call me or like, why can't other guys be like you? Why do they sleep with me and they hang out for 3 months and then they just ghost me? And it's like, well, because that's what their plan was all along. Like they never intended to have a long-term relationship with you. And I'm surprised that it even lasted that long, you know. All right, here goes to the next one. Dating to marriage.
Dating to marriage. Now, this is different. This is dating with vision. It doesn't mean you propose after a week. It means you're watching for the things that last. Values, conflict style. How they talk about people who can't defend themselves. How they show up when it's inconvenient. Dating to marry means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable, because lies now turn into regrets later. You don't need someone perfect. You need someone consistent.
This is interesting because it mentions like I not getting married in like or proposing within a week. I wish I read my book, My Damn Self, because when I was 22, that was the first time I got married. And yeah, it was kind of like I hadn't seen an ex. So technically, I guess, you know, we did know each other and whatnot, but we hadn't seen each other in like 5 years or something like that. And it went like this. I actually thought she was dead. Okay. So while we were still dating, I left the country, and when I tried calling her brother answered the phone, and he's like, "Bro, you didn't hear?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "She died of an overdose." And I was like, "Oh my god, what the fuck are you talking?" And he's like, "Listen, we're still really sensitive. It wasn't that long ago, so my recommendation is just don't even call back." And I didn't. And then, like I said, like about 5 years later, I came back and stuff, and I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and he's like, "Yo, Malik, you're not gonna believe who's on the phone." And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Yes." And he handed me the phone, and it was her. I knew like instantly. I was like, "Oh my God, we have to hang out." It was like a Friday or something like that. By Sunday morning, I think, I called my dad and I was like, "Listen, I'm getting married." And he's like, "All right, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. And he calls me back in 5 minutes, and he told me which mosque to go to because I'm Muslim. And go to the mosque around noonish, and we freaking got married. It was like that, literally like within 3 days, right? And we stayed married for about 2.5 years. Now, we did talk about a lot. And because also we had a previous relationship, there was something to base it off of. But I do not recommend jumping head in without discussing some core values. We had very similar values, but how far we were going to take it was kind of one of those things. It is difficult to have an honest conversation because maybe, for example, like I want 2 kids and she wants 6 kids. And she's not going to tell me, well, actually, you know. So, and sometimes that fear can cause problems later on because then after you have the second kid and she's pregnant with a third and you're like, whoa, 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 we talked about like you're going to be on birth control and stuff, and like that was the only reason I stopped using condoms and all this other stuff, and it's like, yeah, but the reality is I actually want 6 kids, and you're like, whoa, whoa, I just found out you're pregnant with our third and now you're talking about like 2 more or 3 more on top of it. And she's like, yeah, I mean, don't you love me? Blah, blah, blah. And that kind of thing. By the way, I only have one child. So FYI, like I was very, I made sure, and this is one of the reasons I'm very candid in my relationships, as much as I can be. I feel like it's one of those things. You need to know before you get married, not only what your intention with the marriage, what your intention with the relationship is, but what are these core things that for you to feel fulfilled in your marriage are, and you need to discuss them openly and honestly. So yeah.
Someone who grows with you,
Right.
not just beside you. Raising children.
All right, raising children. Next one.
Kids aren't blueprints, they're seeds. You don't control what they become. You just control the soil, the light, and the water. Raise them to be kind, not just smart. To be honest, not just obedient. To think, not just follow. And most importantly, show them that adults mess up too. That apologies are powerful. That love isn't loud, it's daily. Because if you don't raise them intentionally, the world will raise them accidentally.
All right, I'm not really sure why I put the raising children separate from parenting. It's a little strange, to be honest with you. Maybe it was just, because when I had it transcribed, I had it transcribed according to the order of the book itself that I had written. So maybe the way I wrote it, that was the order. Um, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of me and my past in this because some parents are like hyper focused on their kids making money, so that and they're like, that's what I want, or this or that, or like focus only on education, or focus on all these other things, and they forget that you're supposed to make a well-rounded human being, right? You're supposed to make somebody who can face life. A lot of people are not really parenting as much as just being overly protective. And not to say don't protect your kids. Obviously, yes, you need to be vigilant and you need to protect and raise your children and teach them how to recognize these things. Don't just do it, explain it, go over it. And, that's, yeah.
Listening to both sides of the story.
Not gonna lie, I do not know what the heck this has to do with anything.
Most people stop listening once they hear something they agree with. But truth lives in tension, not comfort. There's always more than one side. Sometimes there's 10. And just because you're calm doesn't mean you're right. Just because you're loud doesn't mean you're wrong. Listening is a skill. It's shutting up your ego long enough to hear someone else's pain, even if it pokes at yours.
I think this one was very personal because I have a very loud voice, and like even more so back then, before more journaling, before meditating, before like I mean I'm still loud now, and I have a very unique voice. It's called a penetrating voice, where even if you are in another room behind a cement wall, you will hear me as if I'm in the room with you. So I think that that's part of it, where I've had like people come into my classroom and they're like, what the heck is going on in here? Like, are you going off on the kids? And the kids, like, we're just having a great time and laughing and everything, but it's just the volume and the um penetration level of it is that. So I think this is one of those things where I kind of it was much more of a personal issue.
You can disagree without disrespect. You can challenge without canceling. You just have to be willing to hear what's not easy, and not everyone is.
I think that's it, right. Not everybody's willing to listen to both sides of the story, especially when the story involves us. Um, it doesn't matter how old you are. One of the most difficult things is learning to just shut up and listen. All right, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff.